I never thought being invited for Thanksgiving would end with me standing alone in a fluorescent-lit terminal, holding cranberry sauce that would never be eaten. People around me were hugging, crying, laughing, being claimed. I stood still, suitcase by my side, phone to my ear, heart thudding louder than the arrival announcements. Caroline finally picked up, her voice bright and breathless. "Oh, sorry, Mom. We're already at the table. You can fly back." Click. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I had imagined a delay, maybe an emergency, something human. But that was deliberate. The words echoed. We're already at the table. I wasn't forgotten. I was excluded. My hand shook as I lowered the phone. A family of 5 brushed past me, the youngest child pointing to his grandmother, squealing her name. She ran toward him. Her laughter hit me like a punch to the ribs. Caroline had asked me to come. Just last week, she said Lily missed me. Max wanted to show me his science project. I spent $517 on a flight. I even made the damn cranberry sauce from scratch, the way her father used to like it. My hand still clutched the plastic container, the lid fogging from the airport heat. I'd kept it chilled all flight. A security guard walked by, giving me a quick glance. I must have looked confused. Or worse, abandoned. I took a step backward, nearly bumping into a woman dragging her toddler. "Sorry," I muttered, but she was already gone. I felt old all of a sudden. Not tired. Old. Useless. Like luggage no one had claimed. I didn't want to cry, but my throat burned. I had been so stupid. She didn't want me there. And if I was honest with myself, I knew that long before tonight. Her voice had been different for months. Rushed, clipped. No more lingering calls. No photos of the kids unless I asked. Excuses instead of invitations. She didn't forget me. She just didn't want me anymore. A soft vibration in my coat pocket. A notification. Caroline had posted to social media. I didn't want to look. I looked anyway. A photo. Long wooden table. Candles. A golden turkey. Lily and Max grinning in matching sweaters. Ben standing at the head of the table, carving. Caroline's caption, "Full hearts. Thankful for family." I felt like vomiting. There was no empty seat. No plate left waiting. No space carved out for the woman who paid their mortgage, who held Caroline through a divorce, who missed her own anniversary to fly out last year. I wanted to scream. But I just stood. My back stiffened. I turned off my phone. I was done begging for love disguised as obligation. When Caroline hung up on me, she didn't just end a call. She ended something deeper. A daughter who could leave her mother at an airport the night before Thanksgiving? That daughter didn't need my trust. And soon, she wouldn't have my money either. I sat in a plastic chair under flickering lights, a lukewarm tea cooling in front of me, cranberry sauce sweating through its container. Around me, people were living their stories. An elderly couple sharing fries, a young man asleep against his backpack, a family arguing over directions in Spanish. None of them looked like me. A woman discarded like a receipt. I'd stopped crying. Not because it didn't hurt, but because something else had taken over, something sharper. Rage. I stared at the boarding pass in my hand. $517 wasted. I could have stayed home, lit a candle, and eaten alone with my memories of Thanksgiving mornings from 20 years ago. Caroline in footy pajamas, watching the parade, asking if she could stir the gravy. But no, I'd said yes like a fool. I'd wanted to believe her. And I didn't just fly out. I bent over backwards. I rearranged my medication schedule, prepped the sauce 2 days ahead, made sure my will was updated, just in case. Old habits from my nursing days. Always be ready. What a joke. "Ma'am?" A soft voice beside me. I blinked. A woman in scrubs handed me a napkin. "I saw you earlier. Are you okay?" I looked at her. Maybe 30. Kind eyes. Tired face. I nodded once. "Just got left behind, that's all." She winced. "Family?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She sat down across from me without asking, and slid over a little box of tissues, the kind with the cheap cardboard that caves when you press too hard. "You're not the first," she said softly, "and you won't be the last." I clutched the tissue too tight. My hand was trembling, not from age, but from fury. A fury that had been quiet for years, disguised as patience. I was done being convenient, done being currency. I pulled out my phone and booked the next flight home. 11:10 p.m. The app warned me about the late hour, the short layover, the cost. I booked it anyway. The kind stranger, Janelle, she said, offered to walk me to the gate later. "I'll be here for a while," she smiled. "Holidays in the ER." I thanked her, and meant it. But something else was taking shape inside me now. I wasn't going to fall apart. I was going to fall into something sharper, something focused. They could have their full table and their curated photo posts, but they wouldn't have me. And soon, they wouldn't have the mortgage I'd been paying either. Let them toast their false gratitude, while the ground shifts beneath their feet. The house was cold when I walked in, not from the weather, just the silence, the kind that settles into a place after you've been humiliated. I didn't unpack right away. I left the suitcase in the hallway, the cranberry sauce still sealed. Let it rot. Instead, I walked into the living room and sat in the chair closest to the fireplace, the one Caroline used to curl up in during snowstorms. Her slippers used to be tucked under it. Her giggles used to bounce off these walls. Now it just smelled like wood polish and old grief. I pulled out the Christmas box from the hall closet, half-decorated cards, ribbons, a roll of Scotch tape that always stuck to itself. Near the bottom, I found last year's card from her. I hadn't remembered what it said. "Thanks for everything, Mom. We love you. Caroline, Ben, Lily, and Max." No phone call, no visit, just a card. I read it twice. Then I placed it into a separate box I'd labeled this morning in shaky Sharpie. Caroline. Not Christmas, not family, just her name. Because that's what she'd reduced herself to, just a person I used to know. No longer part of my inner circle. No longer mine. I sat back and stared at the ceiling for a long time. My eyes tracked the corners where cobwebs grew in places I used to dust before the arthritis got bad. Little things I used to worry about. Now all I could think about were the last few times I'd spoken to her. The way her voice rushed through conversations. The way she didn't ask questions anymore, just gave updates. No warmth. No space for me. The exclusion hadn't happened last night. That was just the finale. The unraveling had been happening for years, like a weed you ignore until it cracks the foundation. I opened my phone and reread our last 10 messages. Half of them were about money. The other half? Logistics, pickups, reminders. Not one said, "I miss you." I looked up at the mantel. A photo of Lily, age 4, holding a cupcake with purple frosting. I remembered baking those cupcakes. Carolyn had dropped her off for the weekend, said she and Ben needed a break. I had cleaned Lily's sticky hands, sang to her until she slept, read her favorite dinosaur book 6 times. Caroline had never said thank you. Not once. I reached into the kitchen drawer where I kept my bills and pulled out the file labeled Mortgage, Caroline. Every month, $1,842. For 7 years. I'd paid it without fail. Told myself it was love. Maybe once it was. But now? Now I wasn't even worth a seat at the table. Elaine came by that afternoon. She brought lemon muffins and didn't ask questions. Just walked in, put the kettle on, and set the mugs out like she always had. She was the kind of friend who understood silence. We'd been neighbors for 26 years. She knew when I needed space and when I needed truth. That afternoon, I needed both. I told her everything. The airport, the phone call, the post. Elaine didn't gasp. She didn't say, "Oh no." She just nodded, slowly. They planned that. My jaw tightened. I hadn't let myself think it that way, but hearing it out loud, hearing someone else say what I feared, it landed like a cold stone in my chest. Maybe she just... I started. No, Elaine said firmly. You've given her more grace than she ever earned. She was right. I stirred my tea, hands still stiff from the cold airport terminal. Elaine tapped her spoon gently and said, My cousin went through something like this. Her daughter stopped, including her. Bit by bit, not all at once. It's a pattern. What did she do? I asked. She stopped paying her rent. That word. Rent. It hit me harder than the airport silence. I looked up slowly. I've been paying her mortgage, I said aloud. My own voice startled me. Every month. For 7 years. Elaine's eyes didn't blink. Why? Why? I couldn't even answer. Because she asked. Because she needed help. Because she had the kids. Because that's what mothers do when daughters stumble. But now she had stumbled over me. She said they couldn't have afforded the house back then. I murmured. Ben's business wasn't doing well, and I had the funds after Richard passed, so you gave, and she kept taking. I stared at the checkbook still open from this morning. She hadn't said thank you in years. Not since that first teary phone call, when she said they'd be on the street without me. That's what she said. Mom, we'd lose the house. So I wired it, and kept wiring it. Even when she stopped calling. Even when my birthday went unnoticed. Even when Thanksgiving dinner didn't include a seat for me. Elaine leaned across the table, her voice low and steady. Evelyn, why are you still paying for a house you're not even welcome in? I didn't answer. But deep in my chest, something clicked. A shift. Like a window being opened after years of stale air. I reached for my phone, thumb hovering over Caroline's contact. I didn't call. Instead, I opened my banking app, and for the first time in 7 years, I looked at that transfer not as a gift, but as leverage. The bank smelled like printer ink and tired cologne. A woman with a baby stroller was arguing quietly with a teller about overdraft fees. I sat in the waiting area with my purse clutched tight in my lap, feeling like a fraud. Like a woman pretending to be brave. I'd made the appointment online. Just a review of the family trust account. That's what I told myself. I wasn't here to cause trouble. Not yet. When they called my name, I stood a little slower than usual. My knees weren't the only thing aching today. The advisor's office was glass-walled, polite, sterile. He was younger than I expected. Early 40s, maybe. Black-framed glasses. The kind of man my Richard would have called. Sharp as a tack, but still wet behind the ears. He shook my hand, then pulled up the account details on his monitor. Looks like you're the trustee on a revocable living trust, correct? I nodded. Yes. My daughter is one of the beneficiaries. He glanced at the screen, scrolled a bit, then tilted his head. Looks like you've been using this to make direct mortgage payments on her property? Yes, I said. For several years now. He leaned back slightly, thoughtful. Okay, just so we're clear. There's no legal obligation to continue that support. As trustee, you retain full discretion. You can revoke access at any time. That word again. Revoke. It didn't sound cruel in his voice. It sounded practical. Would she be notified if I did? I asked. Not necessarily. He said carefully. Unless you cancel a recurring transaction. But even then, she'd only be alerted when the funds fail to arrive. He glanced over his glasses. Would you like to flag her account for review? I didn't answer right away. I thought about that night at the airport. The families reuniting. The child who ran into his grandmother's arms. I thought about Caroline's voice. Casual, dismissive. We're already at the table. I'd been her safety net for years. And now, she'd cut me from her life like expired milk. Yes, I said slowly. Let's flag it. For now. But don't notify her. He nodded, tapping on his keyboard. Would you like to receive transaction alerts moving forward? Yes, I said again. Louder this time. He clicked a few more boxes. Done. As I left the bank, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Like I'd just finished cleaning out a room no one thanked me for keeping all those years. But something else was there too. A seed of resolve. Because now I knew the rules of the game. And she didn't know I'd finally picked up the board. Daniel's office still smelled like paper and cedar, and the faint echo of my husband's voice. He and Richard had been friends since college, back when ambition was louder than arthritis, and life still had a clean page feel to it. Daniel had been our lawyer for decades, but more than that, he was steady. He had known me when I was just a nurse, a mother, a woman following someone else's lead. Now I was alone, and I needed facts. He read through the documents I'd brought like a surgeon, careful, precise, emotionless, until he looked up over his reading glasses and said, "Evelyn, you're not obligated anymore." The words landed with such quiet finality I almost didn't catch them. "I set this up with Richard," I said, "to protect her, to make sure Caroline had a home if anything happened to me." Daniel nodded. "And you've done that, for years. But Evelyn," he tapped the page lightly, "this isn't a legal obligation. This is generosity, one you can withdraw at any time." I stared at the paper, my signature at the bottom, my initials in the margins, all the control I'd signed away, out of love. "Does she know that?" I asked. Daniel smiled faintly, dry. "She probably assumes the money is permanent. Most adult children do, when they've never had to ask where it comes from." I laughed once, bitter, short. He leaned back. "I can help you restructure the trust. Make sure it reflects your priorities now, not the ones you made 10 years ago when you still thought she saw you as her mother. Not her checkbook." That last part pierced something inside me. I nodded. "What would that look like?" He pulled out a notepad and began writing. "We'd amend the disbursement clauses, add contingencies, remove the recurring mortgage support unless explicitly approved. We can even put the property in your name again if she can't meet new terms." It sounded clinical, strategic, but not cruel. He looked up at me again. "You're not cutting her off, Evelyn. You're just taking your name off the doormat." That was the moment I knew. I wasn't doing this to hurt her. I was doing this to stop hurting myself. "I want to move forward," I said. "Let's do it." For the first time in days, my chest loosened, not with joy, but clarity. Because the moment I stopped asking, "How could she?" I started asking, "What now?" The line at the post office wrapped around like a snake made of sighs and scarves. Holiday season. People with arms full of boxes, cheerful stamps, promises of warmth. I waited quietly with a single envelope tucked in my purse. Not a check, not a gift, just a card. I'd picked it carefully. Plain white, embossed snowflakes. The kind she wouldn't look twice at unless there was cash inside. She'd know something was missing when she opened it. I wrote it last night. One line. No flourish. No warmth. Hope Thanksgiving was nice. I flew back safely. That was it. No, "Love, Mom." No reminder I paid for her life. Just a reflection of hers. Because silence, I've learned, speaks louder when you stop apologizing for it. I stepped forward when they called, handed over the envelope, asked for tracking. The woman behind the counter smiled like it was any other errand. And maybe to her it was. But to me, it was the first thing I'd sent Caroline in years that didn't cost me a single piece of my dignity. As I left, I thought about the cards I used to send. Birthday envelopes with folded checks, Christmas boxes stuffed with toys, shoes, books for the kids. Packages that made her look like the perfect mother. Grandma came through again, but this year, there'd be no extra gifts. No holiday rescue. Just that small card, sitting in her mailbox. I wondered if she'd feel anything when she opened it. Confusion? Guilt? Annoyance? Or nothing at all. But it didn't matter. Because for the first time in a long time, I knew what I felt. Not anger, not heartbreak, just relief. Like I'd finally stopped watering a garden that never grew anything but weeds. It came on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd just finished folding laundry. Sheets still warm from the dryer, the scent of lavender clinging to my sleeves when my phone buzzed. Voicemail. I hadn't even heard it ring. But the name on the screen made my fingers twitch. Caroline. For a second, I just stared at it. My heart didn't race. Not this time. Because I knew what it would say. I didn't expect an apology. I tapped play. Hey, Mom, just noticed something weird with the account. Can you call the bank? Her voice was sugary. Too calm. That kind of sweet you use when you want something from someone you think still owes you. Not a big deal. Just, a little hiccup, I guess. Maybe something got flagged. Can you check on it for me? She paused, then added softly, Hope everything's okay. That part, the fake concern, it almost made me laugh. Not a cruel laugh, just tired. Hope everything's okay? You left me standing in an airport terminal on Thanksgiving Eve, Caroline. I forwarded the voicemail to Daniel without replying. His response came within minutes. Let her notice, don't engage. She'll realize soon enough. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't her mother anymore. Not in the way she'd gotten used to. I was no longer the fixer. Not the lifeline. Not the woman who filled the gaps in her marriage, her budget, her life. That role had expired. And now she was hearing the silence where my help used to be. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the kitchen window, watching the bare trees sway under December's gray sky. My phone sat on the counter, screen still lit with her name. I didn't call back. Let her feel it. Let her realize that generosity comes with a heartbeat. And mine had stopped bending. The frost had already kissed the petals, but I trimmed them anyway. My hands, stiff with cold, still remembered how to be gentle. It was always Richard's favorite part of winter, when the roses clung to color just a little too long, refusing to let go. Stubborn things. Just like I used to be. Just like Caroline used to be when she loved me without conditions. The shears made a soft snip, over and over. Quiet, final. I hadn't heard from her again since the voicemail. No text, no second call. I pictured her pacing, checking her app, realizing money didn't magically appear anymore. That Mom wasn't just a button she could press for deposits. But the ache wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was grief. Not just for what she did on Thanksgiving, but for how long she'd been disappearing, piece by piece, while I kept pretending we were still a mother and daughter. I remembered her as a little girl, how she'd sit cross-legged on this very patch of lawn, making daisy chains, talking to herself in made-up languages. I remembered the night she cried in my lap after her miscarriage, how I held her through it, fed her soup, stayed until Ben got home. I remembered all the versions of her I had loved, and now I couldn't even recognize her voice. The worst part? She hadn't changed. Not overnight. I had just refused to see who she became. Love without respect. That's what it was. She loved the comfort, the fallback, the bottomless well of forgiveness. But not me, not my boundaries, not my weariness, not my humanity. A gust of wind shook the brittle leaves loose. I pulled my shawl tighter and stepped back to survey the garden. Bare, quiet, honest. For the first time, I saw it not as a place of memories, but of boundaries. Because there's a difference between giving someone your love and handing them the deed to your soul. And I was done offering myself up like some seasonal service. I brushed the soil from my gloves and whispered to no one, I miss her, but I don't miss being used. Daniel had the papers ready when I walked in. No small talk, no hesitations, just the soft rustle of truth being put in writing. I sat across from him, my coat still zipped. The cold outside matched the steel inside me now. He slid the letter across the desk. Everything we discussed, clear, legal, and enforceable. I read every word. 60 days to assume financial responsibility for the property located at her address. Failure to do so will result in reversion of ownership as outlined in the amended trust terms. No threats, no accusations, just facts. I held the paper between my fingers, felt the weight of it. Not heavy. Earned. Will she be able to contest this? I asked. Daniel shook his head. No. She benefited from your generosity, not a contract. You owe her nothing more than what you've already given. Years of unpaid grace. I nodded slowly. And the tone? Neutral, he said. Cold, if she reads it with guilt. Professional, if she reads it with respect. We both knew which way she'd read it. I signed the bottom. My name strong and certain. The same name she used when she needed a co-signer, a babysitter, a lifeline. I'll have it mailed after New Year's, he said. Let the holidays pass. I laughed once. She didn't give me Thanksgiving. She can survive January. He smiled. Sad, proud. You're not being cruel, Evelyn. You're setting a standard. She can stand on her own. And if she can't, that's not your weight anymore. I didn't say anything for a while. I looked out the window at the quiet city below. People rushing into shops. Parents holding tiny mittened hands. Life moving forward. She told me once, I murmured, that she'd never make it without me. Daniel leaned back. Now we'll find out if she was telling the truth, or just making a threat disguised as dependence. I folded the letter and tucked it into my purse. It was more than paper. It was a reclamation. Not revenge. Accountability. Let her read it. Let her scream. Let her finally learn what it means to live without a backup plan named Mom. The snow was fresh that morning, soft and untrampled, like the world had hit reset overnight. I stood on the front porch, gloved fingers curled around the envelope. It felt heavier than it was, not because of weight, because of what it ended. She'd see it in a day or two. A standard envelope, white, unassuming. But inside, the first boundary I'd enforced in over a decade, the notice spelled it out clearly, 60 days, no exceptions. If she wanted to keep the house, she'd have to carry it herself. No more anonymous payments from the shadows. No more, "Thanks, Mom," voicemails said with empty gratitude. I walked slowly to the mailbox at the end of my driveway. My boots crunched over ice patches. The wind bit through my scarf. But inside me, stillness. No shaking hands. No second guessing. Just the rhythm of resolve. I opened the box, placed the envelope inside, and let the door clang shut. It didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like truth. For years I'd been her cushion, soft, absorbing every blow. She never had to feel the consequences of her choices because I was always there, papering over the cracks with checks and cheerful excuses. But now she'd feel what I felt that night at the airport. Unchosen. Not because I was cruel. Because I was done being erased while footing the bill. As I turned back toward the house, a cardinal darted across the yard and landed in the bare oak. Richard used to say they were messengers. I don't know if I believe in signs, but in that moment, I chose to. I whispered into the cold, "It's done." Let her open that envelope. Let her feel the chill of reality. Because this winter, it belonged to me. She called at 9:42 the next morning. I was folding towels in the laundry room when the phone rang. My old cordless still clipped to the wall. The name flashed across the screen, Caroline. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail again. But I didn't. I answered. Calm, steady, ready. Her voice hit my ear like a storm. "Mom, what is this?" I just got a notice. Some legal thing in the mail about the house. What is going on? No hello. No good morning. I kept folding the towel in my hands. You received the 60-day letter? Yes, I did. Are you trying to scare me? Are you punishing me? Punishing. That word again. The cry of someone who never learned to hear no without calling it cruelty. I took a breath. No, Caroline. I'm not punishing you. I'm informing you. She was quiet for a second. Then her voice dropped to something sharp. I knew that tone. The one she used when she wanted to guilt me into backing down. I just don't understand how you could do this right after the holidays. After everything we've been through. Everything we've been through. I pressed the folded towel down onto the stack and said quietly, "You made your priorities clear on Thanksgiving." There was a pause. I stood at that airport with a suitcase and cranberry sauce I made from scratch. And you left me there. Not by accident. You chose it. I didn't think you'd take it that way, she said quickly. I didn't answer that. Instead, I continued. So now I'm making my priorities clear. Her voice rose, defensive, edging into desperation. Mom, we have the kids, the school payments. Ben's job isn't stable right now. We've built our life around that house, around your support. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. That was the mistake, I said. Building your life around someone else's sacrifice. But you offered, Mom. For years. You said. I did, I interrupted gently. And now I'm saying no. Silence. Heavy. Stunned. And then her voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard in a long time. Not since she was a teenager, getting caught in a lie. So that's it? You're just done? I could have softened then. Could have said it depends. Or we'll see. But I didn't. I said, you'll figure it out, Caroline. You're resourceful when it suits you. Then I pressed end. I stood there for a long time, hand still on the phone, the silence ringing louder than her voice ever did. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel powerful. It felt necessary. I opened my email while waiting for bread to rise. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and quiet. I wasn't expecting anything but newsletters and spam. But there it was. Subject line, "Hi, Grandma," from Lily. My hands froze. Why weren't you at Thanksgiving, Grandma? Mom said you were sick. We saved you a seat at first. Then she told us not to worry. But I was worried. The words blurred as I read them again. Sick. That's what Caroline told her daughter. That I was sick. Not unwanted. Not uninvited. Just too frail to show. I sat down. Slowly. My heart didn't break. It clenched. Tight and quiet. Like a fist made of love that had nowhere to go. She lied to the kids. She didn't just abandon me. She rewrote the story. I pictured Lily at that long table, looking around, waiting for me. Maybe she'd brought the little clay turkey I helped her paint when she was 5. Maybe she looked toward the door every time it opened. And Caroline had looked her in the eyes and said, I was too sick to come. I wiped my hands on my apron, opened a reply, and typed with trembling fingers. Hi, sweetheart. Thank you for asking. I wasn't sick. I just wasn't invited this year. That's all. I read it twice. Simple, true. No bitterness. I didn't want to poison her against her mother. I just wanted her to know the truth. Before she grew up believing the story Caroline built over my silence. I clicked send. And for a moment, I thought of Caroline as a girl. Her own long letters to Santa. Her tiny fingers scrawling, Dear Grandma, on birthday cards I kept in a drawer for years. I wonder when she decided truth was optional. I wonder when she started confusing omission with protection. Or maybe she just thought her kids wouldn't ask questions. But Lily did. And I answered. I didn't know she'd share the email, but I'm glad she did. Elaine called me the next day, her voice buzzing with a mix of shock and something close to pride. Well, she said, you've set off a firestorm. I didn't understand what she meant until she forwarded me a screenshot. The Gardner family group chat. Lily had posted a photo of my email. No caption, no commentary. Just the plain message. I wasn't sick, I just wasn't invited this year. And then the thread exploded. Ben. Wait, what? Max, bless him. You told us she couldn't travel. Then silence from Caroline. Until finally, Ben again. You lied to all of us? Elaine said the story came out during dinner. Lily wouldn't look her mother in the eye. Max pushed his plate away. Ben read my email aloud at the table, his voice flat. Then he looked at Caroline and asked, why? And she didn't have an answer. She stammered, said it was a misunderstanding, said Mom was being dramatic. It was just a timing issue. But kids remember. Husbands remember. And lies, especially the small ones, have sharp edges when they cut trust. Elaine said Caroline stood up halfway through dinner, face flushed, mouth tight. She left her plate, left the table, went upstairs, and didn't come back down. And me? I didn't gloat. I didn't pour a glass of wine or smile at the justice of it. I just sat at my kitchen table, holding the last of the cinnamon toast I'd made for myself, and felt quiet, Not vindicated, just seen. It had been years since anyone stood up for me. Years since the truth had landed somewhere other than my chest. Lily didn't mean to cause drama. She just wanted to understand. But that's what honesty does. It cracks things open, even when it's whispered gently. For a long time, I thought silence was strength. But maybe strength is also letting people see what they've buried. Caroline buried me in her absence. And now, her daughter dug me up. One email, one truth, one ripple. And suddenly, the house she ruled with guilt felt a little less solid. The mediation office had beige walls and tissues on every surface. Neutral ground, they called it. It felt more like a waiting room for grief. The slow kind, where people finally faced the versions of themselves they forced others to tolerate. Caroline was already sitting when I arrived. Hair too neat, sweater too expensive for January. She looked up once, then looked away like I was a bill she didn't want to open. Ben nodded stiffly at me. His jaw was tight. I didn't know if it was from shame or just holding in the things he should have said months ago. The mediator, Karen, with kind eyes and a clipboard, opened gently. We're here to resolve the current financial tension in a way that respects both parties. Caroline jumped in before I said a word. I just don't understand how she could do this to us, to me. I'm her daughter? She said it like a trump card. Like that word, daughter, was the magic key to everything. Karen turned to me. Evelyn? I folded my hands in my lap. I didn't do anything to her. I stopped doing everything for her. Caroline huffed. You cut me off in the middle of a school year. Ben's trying to adjust with work. The kids need stability. You've never done this before. Exactly, I said. I've never done it before. That's the problem. She looked like she'd been slapped. Her face flushed, and her mouth moved soundlessly for a moment. You're my mother, she said, quieter now. Don't I matter to you? I tilted my head. You do, but I don't matter to you. Not unless I'm giving. Ben looked down. Karen stayed still. I continued, voice low but steady. Caroline, I've paid your mortgage for 7 years. I missed vacations, dipped into savings, clipped grocery coupons, just so you wouldn't have to worry. And you left me standing in an airport on Thanksgiving night like a forgotten bag. It wasn't supposed to, she started. It did happen. She blinked fast. Her hands twisted in her lap. I thought we were family, she whispered. I nodded. So did I. Silence filled the room. Then I looked her in the eye. You say you're my daughter. I'm telling you, I'm a person, not your wallet. She broke. Not in grief, not in reflection. In control. Tears came, yes, but not from regret, from losing her grip. Because her role, the one where she cried and I saved, was slipping away. Karen offered tissues. Caroline took them. Ben didn't speak, and I didn't move to comfort her. Because sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is let them feel it. The envelope arrived on the first day of March. Thin. Official. A single page confirming what I already knew in my bones. The mortgage payment wasn't made. 60 days had passed. She hadn't found a way. Or maybe she still believed I'd cave. But I didn't. I let the deadline stand. The property had reverted back into my name, per the revised trust agreement. Daniel had filed everything weeks ago. It was just a matter of time. Now it was done. The house she thought she'd secured, on my back, my savings, my silence, was no longer hers. Not because I stole it, but because I stopped funding her illusion. I sat at my kitchen table, holding the letter in one hand, my tea in the other. No celebration, no champagne, just the stillness of knowing the boundary held. Across town, she'd be opening a similar envelope. Her world, once built on the quiet confidence that Mom will handle it, was crumbling. Not from cruelty, from consequence. Ben hadn't called. The kids had stopped texting. I suspected the silence wasn't punishment. It was shock. They were watching the rules of their world rewrite themselves in real time. Caroline hadn't believed I'd follow through. She'd bet on the version of me who always folded, who mistook guilt for obligation, who paid and paid and paid for a seat at a table I was no longer welcome at. But that version of me no longer existed. And this wasn't revenge. It was repossession of my money, of my name, of my self-respect. She could refinance. She could sell. She could leave. That part wasn't mine to manage anymore. I stepped outside that afternoon. The air was still sharp with winter's grip, but I could see crocus tips pressing through the soil. Tiny things, but persistent. Much like the part of me that finally said, enough. Elaine and I sit in the backyard most evenings now. She brings wine, I bring the past, and we sift through it like women sorting seeds, deciding what's worth planting again and what we finally let rot. I still miss the version of Caroline who braided my hair when she was 6, who cried when I left for night shifts, who wrote I love you on every card, even the ones without money tucked inside. But I don't miss the silence she made me sit in as she took from me. I don't miss pretending her love was enough when her respect never showed up. Some lessons bloom late, but they do bloom. And if you water your own roots long enough, eventually you stop chasing the ones who only came to pick the flowers.